Good evening. Welcome to the Policy Committee meeting for tonight. There is no public comment. We'll start with Mr. Johnson with the policy update plan.
Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. For the policy update plan, we have 4 policies that we will be reviewing this evening for a second reading. And as you can see, policy 249 was recently approved at the February board meeting. The generative AI policy that we reviewed for first reading at our last committee meeting, we are going to table that and have an information session with our solicitor to review that information and to come up with a policy and a review of policy that fits our needs. The first policy that we will address is policy 204 on attendance. And we do not have any changes unless the board has information they would like to review regarding policy 204 with respect to attendance. So I'll just scroll through the policy, and based on our prior reading as well as the first reading, if there's any comment from the board, we can address that particular issue or issues. Not hearing any
Yeah.
comments,
Made the
we'll
changes,
move
right.
on to policy 218.1. There is one area that we need to discuss with respect to this policy, and it's on the final page under guidelines, so I will go to that area. And if there's any further comment after that, we can review that as well. So we had some comments on this, and our solicitor, Mike Miller, provided us with some guidance. And the question here is if we want to check this box regarding, in accordance with federal law, possession or discharge of a firearm. I think the solicitor was pretty clear in sharing the belief that the language within this part of the policy is for those who are displaying, brandishing, or using a firearm within the identified distance listed within this policy.
Meaning, if someone has a shotgun,
And they're displaying it, showing it, using it.
but if they have it in their house because they go hunting,
Yes. Perfectly
we're
acceptable.
not in violation of that.
Yes.
Or they're not in violation of this.
Yeah,
Right.
I think his feedback made sense,
Yeah.
and I'm good with it at this point.
Same.
So we will, just to be clear, we will be checking that box.
Yes.
Any other comments on 218.1?
No.
Next policy, 805.1. Again, similar to policy 204 on attendance. No recommended updates or adjustments from the first reading unless there's further comment from the board.
I think we're happy with that one.
Final policy for second reading is policy 805.2. Again, we sought feedback from the Mike Miller, and he had some suggestions, and I'm going to go to that section at the, again, ironically, the final page of the policy under other agreements. Mike suggested, Mr. Miller suggested that we consider, that you as the board consider entering into other agreements, and he stated that he would help write that agreement with the police. I think he thought that it would increase clarity of police engagement within the schools.
Yeah, I like that idea.
So would we look at that before this went through?
So, no, what we could do is we could check that box, and over the course of the next few months, even into the summer, look to write up an agreement. It doesn't have to be in advance of the policy being approved, but once we do approve the policy, we would need to look at whether or not we would write that agreement. So if we check this box, then that means we're agreeing to have some sort of language about another agreement outside of just an MOU with local law enforcement.
Is that something that we see that do other districts do that? Is that common?
He did.
It is
say that,
common.
yeah. So I would recommend that we check that box, again, because from his perspective, it would allow for greater engagement with the police and more clarity outside of the MOU, memorandum of understanding.
Did Mr. Gallo take a look at these two, and they seem okay with him?
He saw 805.1, not 805.2. But yes, once we go through this second reading, if we're all in agreement, it will be important for him to be a part of that process as well,
Yeah.
in specific because we're checking this box.
And it's not that that's not going on now. I think that codifies what we are doing, that he is meeting with them.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes the policy committee meeting for tonight. The next meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 8th, 2026. Thank you.
Whoa.
8-minute policy.
You're welcome after the last one.
Well done.
After the last one.
Well,
I
that's
took
because we spent
feedback.
that marathon going over all these.
All right, yeah, he was going next.
All right, so now we are up for Student Services Committee. We are going to start with public comment. We do have one public comment. According to Policy 903, public comment on matters of concern, official action, or deliberation is limited to 3 minutes. Should be directed to the entire school board following the announcement of your name and municipality. Under this policy, the presiding officer has the authority to warn or stop a public commenter when violation of this policy occurs. So we have one person. I'm going at the 1 minute mark. I'll put up the sign so it'll give you, yeah, an update, sorry. The first one up is Ms. Heather Karmazian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Karmazin. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'm a proud parent of a second grader and a third grader at Seiler Elementary. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to talk about the proposed rezoning. I understand these decisions are complex. You're balancing enrollment, capacity, staffing, and long-term planning. I respect the responsibility you all carry. But tonight, I'm asking you to hear about children that are actually being affected. My children are established at Seiler. They've built friendships, strong relationships with their teachers. They proudly wear their Thunderpack gear. They attend events, and they have a real sense of identity as a Seiler Panther. That sense of belonging matters, especially in elementary school. We live where no houses are really around us. We're not in a neighborhood. Because of that, my husband and I intentionally have helped our children build those connections through the schools. We show up, we invest in this community, and because we believed my kids would go to the middle school from Seiler. Under both proposed scenarios, my children would move to Deibler. I've heard it's a wonderful school, and I don't doubt that. But it's not where they're rooted. They would leave behind their peer group, teachers, and stability. My greatest concern is in the long-term picture. If this passes, my children would leave Seiler for a few years to go to Deibler. Then they would return to Central with their former classmates, while most of their new classmates from Deibler would go to North. That means repeated disruption, leaving friendships, rebuilding, and readjusting again. We also have important questions, such as, how many children are truly being affected by this rezoning plan? Why were families informed in January with a vote expected in March when neighboring school districts have been discussing rezoning information from the starting of the school year? Why does this feel so rushed? Have we studied the academic and social emotional impact of moving established elementary students? And where has the transparency been since full day kindergarten was introduced, knowing it would eventually impact established students? I respectfully ask you to slow down, study the data, and give reassurance that the same group of children that are being affected by this proposed plan are not affected with repeated changes in the future. We know academic success and social emotional wellness begins with prevention, which is stability, belonging, and community. Thank you for your time and for considering the families behind these numbers.
Thank you. So we didn't have anyone else up to speak. So we will move right along to our agenda, which is the high school baseball team overnight trip request. Mr. Hunt? Thank you.
All right, I'm just here to represent the baseball program in the athletic department to just ask for consideration and approval for our baseball team's trip to Aberdeen, Maryland. Last year, they did this trip. It provides them an opportunity to go play in state-of-the-art turf facilities that are in preparation for their season that's upcoming, which starts the following week. This year, they're choosing to stay overnight, which prompted them to make sure we got board approval because they'll be staying away from their parents in a hotel with the coaches. They would leave Thursday afternoon, as it's written, so that they would be able to practice at this facility prior to playing in a series of modified games next day against other schools from multiple states. This would serve as one of their scrimmage opportunities that they get. It might also be the first time that they get to see a baseball diamond with the current state of the ground, since we have not yet 7 or 8 more inches worth of frost line to get through. So that's all going to hemorrhage to the top, and we're going to be in soup for a while. So I just feel it's a really great opportunity, provide some team building. And last year they left at 4 o'clock in the morning. This year they get to leave after the majority of the school day, have some time with their teammates, get a practice in, and then hopefully go beat up on some other teams the next day. Any questions?
This is the first time that they're staying, you said overnight, correct?
First time they're staying overnight, yeah. So we're just trying to make sure that, we're establishing a process for folks that they're considering keeping kids overnight and anywhere, that we want to make sure that we're vetting this through the administration and then bringing it to you guys with all the details and be able to ask any questions you may have about the purposes of the trip.
And everyone on the team has the opportunity to attend?
Boosters have done a great job with their fundraising, and
Yeah, I see that. Everything's hotel, meals, snacks, drinks. It's great.
And Mr. Hunt, this is the Ripken experience
Ripken experience.
Okay.
So if you've ever driven south
on 95?
down 95, you've seen it on the right. So if you got kids that play baseball, you'll probably spend a small fortune there in your travels.
Any questions? No? All right, thank you. Have a great time. All right, next up is our presentation of the elementary rezoning with Dr. Palmer.
Good evening. This evening, I'm going to go through with you our recommendation for elementary rezoning. Just a reminder of our timeline. We had our initial presentation in February, talking about the potential zone boundaries that we were considering. We brought forward that for board review and community feedback. This evening, we're going to be presenting it says finalized, but it's definitely not completely finalized at this point, zone boundaries. And then, after this evening, we would move forward in March with looking at exemption requests, solidifying those, working with families, and working on our bus transportation rerouting, which will be a large part of this as well, and providing welcome events in May and August for our students. So I'm going to share a little bit of things that we've spoken about when I came to you previously. The rationale for moving through an elementary rezoning project has a number of things, particularly, or most particularly, the uneven enrollment changes that have taken place across the district, the capacity pressures that we've been having at some of our schools, Bedminster, Seiler, and Grass in particular. We do have an anticipated increase in kindergarten enrollment. It's not the major factor. As I said, we have about a 23% increase in students when you go from kindergarten into first grade. So we have an anticipation that we'd have about an additional 75 students that we'd be picking up from full-day kindergarten. We have just now been receiving kindergarten applications, so we don't know what that impact will be. We'll continue to be receiving those students as they register throughout the spring. The last count, I think we're somewhere around 100 so far had registered. We've had series of residential developments that have come in across the district. One's in West Rock Hill recently on Old Bethlehem Pike, a number in Hilltown, in Silverdale, Sellersville, and in Dublin. And we haven't had a comprehensive elementary rezoning in more than 10 years. In fact, it is 20 years. As I had found out, the typical cycle for this is about 5 to 8 years. So we would typically do something like this, looking at balancing the elementary zones. This work came from an enrollment study that the board had supported last year. What you're looking at here, this bar graph is showing the enrollments, the projected enrollments that Pell had done in their previous studies. They had done 4 for us. If you look on there, starting way back in 2006, 2007. And with the exception of the one that was conducted in 2012-13, we think that they're very accurate. You'll see the line on that graph shows the actual student enrollment. So you'll see that over the last 10 years in that study, we'd had a decreasing enrollment, and they were within just a few percent of that. So from 2016 to 2025, the district enrollment fell by almost 1,200. It's 1,185 students. And some of the questions people had asked, we reviewed this a little the last time I spoke, are district population trends. So although in the district we have an increasing number of people, we don't have an increasing number of students. So you'll see in the census from 2000 to 2022, the number of school-age children, 18 and under, fell by over 1,000, 1,533 in that time. In addition to that, some people have seen that we've had lots of housing developments that have been going in. You'll see that our housing units were over 16,000 in 2000, rose to over 20,000 in 2022. However, during that time, the number of students that we were getting from housing units fell. So if you look way back in the 1980s, 1970s, we had much, much higher number of students per unit. So people had generally larger families in our area. So now we've fallen from 0.422 to 0.332. So that is for every single house or apartment that's in our district, only 0.3 students would be generated. And I added a little table at the bottom. You can see there, those were the number of units of change. And it's certainly not equal across the district. You'll see that Hilltown had an increase of 1,739 housing units in that 20-year period, while Sellersville actually fell by 17. There were 17 fewer houses in that particular area. So you're going to see some differences, obviously, in the trends of growth. So if we're looking at just enrollment in our buildings, so you'll see the elementary buildings, followed by the middle schools at the bottom. You see that the blue are increases. So from 2016 to 2017, all of our elementary schools fell in enrollment. However, we are projected in the next 5 years, so by 2029, 2030 school year, to see increases at Bedminster, Sellersville, and Siler, while having decreases at Deibler, Guth. West Rock Hill remains relatively even.
Hello. Sorry.
The other thing that we had done as part of our projections last year was to work with Breslin Architects, who completed a utilization study for us. So looking at their enrollment projections, Breslin then went and took a look at each one of our buildings and how they're being used. They also took Pell's projections to look at what the potential impact would be on enrollment and utilization percentage. So at an elementary school, when we talk about utilization, you can imagine if we took every single classroom and took all of those classrooms and put them to the maximum number of students they could hold, that would be 100%. In an elementary school, we typically don't want to have over 90%, because having over 90%, it doesn't really give you the flexibility. You can't really put, every single classroom at maximum. So you need to have some wiggle room within your building. The bottom table shows how we're using our classrooms. So you'll see the number of classrooms greater than 660 square feet. That's the size of a typical classroom for a grade level. And you'll see we also have the number of rooms we're using for related services, for art, for STEM. So you'll see that each one of our buildings has a STEM room, an art room, and a music room, with the exception of grass, which does not have a music room dedicated. Those students are using the stage right now. In addition, our schools also use a number of classrooms for providing special education services. Those might be for autistic support, for emotional support, for life skills. We could have multidisciplinary classes, OT and PT services at some of their school, and also ELD services. So you'll see that we do have some classrooms used in there. So you might say, oh, there's 20 some rooms, but we don't actually have 27 classrooms at Sellersville. A lot of those rooms are used for our other special education classes we're dedicated. So when we last met, I said that we were doing a feedback survey. We've received, in my last count, 210 responses. You'll just see a breakdown there. Most of them were from Siler, from Bedminster, and from Sellersville. And the majority of respondents responded that they understood the presentation that was provided and the supporting documents for rezoning. Not that they agreed with it. When we're looking at some of the feedback, things that are important to people that they rated, so you'll see that what was really important to them was keeping siblings together, long-term stability, that is not making these changes frequently, and school culture and continuity. Less frequently, people responded about class sizes, and the least concern area was logistics, making space for full-day kindergarten, and equity across our schools. One of the things that people really supported was honoring requests for our students who had been through elementary school to have the opportunity to remain and finish out their 5th grade at their school. So that's something that we're definitely trying to incorporate into our recommendation. And the respondents also really liked all of the ideas that we had shared regarding transition activities, including visitations of the schools, meet and greet with the principals and with the teachers, and an opportunity to connect with other families in that area. We received a tremendous number of responses from families who really wanted to share stories. So in addition to what people had shared in the feedback form, we got phone calls, emails, lots of questions and concerns. And these are the things people really focused on. What is the emotional impact going to be for their children? That is, moving from schools is a pretty serious thing, and their concerns are about kids' abilities to feel safe, fit into a new community if they had to relocate. Students who have special needs, IEPs or 504 plans, how are we going to focus on supporting those students, which will be a big factor as part of our transition plans. Neighborhood cohesion. A lot of families reached out about concerns that neighborhoods might be split in half when they looked at the different zoning options. That was a major factor in our recommendation. And there was a lot of responses about grandfathering and phased approaches. People were interested in the ability for kids to stay as much as possible. Others focused on transportation. There were a lot of concerns about the length of rides, moving of stops, which is something that we're really going to need to focus on closely in our rerouting. Fairness and equity. A lot of people brought up concerns about not having equity across all the schools in terms of Title I eligibility, if we had additional students who were on free and reduced lunch, PTA funding gaps that might take place in families that had raised money at one school versus another, and resource availability. We also had concerns about swapping students. That is, some schools were bringing students on one side while they were losing students on the other side. It's definitely a concern. It's not ideal, but because we've had continuous growth on the eastern side of the towns, of the school district, and falling on the western side, it's really difficult to move kids, let's say, from Bedminster to West Rock Hill because they don't touch. So you'll see that in this, Dibler actually has to have its boundaries adjusted in the same direction towards the eastern side. A lot of concerns about family logistics, potential costs that could have for them for childcare with changes to the times that schools were starting. And one that's not up here that I did hear a couple times was about middle school, concerns about which middle school a child was going to. So in this, just to be clear, we are not changing the middle school boundaries in this proposal as it is, so that on our website, we have a list of where the boundaries are. So if a person is zoned to be going to Central Middle School, that has not changed for next year. So a kid that would be going to Central Middle School would still be going to Central Middle School, regardless of any changes we're going to make to the elementary boundaries for next year. And a little bit of review, if you recall, this is our picture of the attendance zones with the link to the street level maps that we have on the district website. These were the projected enrollments. So when we were looking at these, we saw that a number of our enrollments would potentially exceed that 90% Siler, going to as high as 95% utilization. And a lot of those impacts, are going to go to things like increased class sizes, potential of having to get rid of some of our specials classrooms, shifting of students in special education. So there's definitely going to be an impact at those schools. We also had these two attendance zone boundary scenarios, if you recall. This was number 5, which really radically reshaped the way Sellersville was situated, as well as pushing a large section of Siler down into the grass area while moving some of grass into the Siler region. So there were some significant impacts there, as well as the line between West Rock Hill and Dibler. The other was 6, which drastically expanded the size of Siler, shifting some of grass territory into the Siler region, with still some significant impact between Deibler and Bedminster in that line that runs right along Elephant Road. So, to talk about the recommendation. So it is our recommendation that the board adopt attendance boundaries consistent with scenario 6 provided by TPS, with some notable exceptions and potential exemptions. So 6 was by far the most preferred in terms of the responses we received, both internally and externally. However, there are some significant things we need to look at along those boundaries that have been brought forward. There was a significant concern about the division of Bedminster Hunt that was proposed that would divide that community. I believe that was the area that was affected 20 years ago. My friends lived right there and got shifted from Bedminster into Deibler. That was the last transition that had happened. And this one in 6 actually split that. So that's something we need to go back and look at. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's not that many kids to have an impact on. Sterling Knoll was another section near Sellers, or in Siler, but in Silverdale. That region was a concern as well. And particularly Percy Borough, the Guth walking zone, there were some students in scenario 6 that would be moved from Guth to West Rock Hill, moving them from walkers in that zone to bus riders. So that is another one that we're going to have to go back and look at very closely to adjust. In addition, our transportation department, we have not gone through this for usability because we really need to look at the impact this would have on our routing. We don't want to increase the length of our bus routes. We don't want to increase the number of bus routes that are needed, increase the number of buses we would have, and we certainly don't want to turn kids from walkers into riders. We will also going to look at some specific adjustments. I think there was, it's brought up at Grass Guth, West Rock Hill. We could do a little bit better in terms of balancing out the enrollment percentages for each of those schools. And also, the recommendation is to really move forward with an attendance zone exemption for grade 4 students. So a student that's been there, we think it's important to keep them and their family at their school for their 5th grade elementary school. I think we should do that to the very best of our ability. I certainly believe we should have room for them. Really important things to point out that I've talked about, that scenario 6 is the best option in terms of all the ones we looked at for reducing those sort of islands and stranding neighborhoods being divided. It has the best socioeconomic balance among all of the scenarios we examined. It does have better alignment in terms of stability, culture, and minimizing the disruptions. I've tried desperately to get a good, accurate measure of how many specific students would be affected in this. I believe it is somewhere just shy of 200, somewhere between 170 and 200 individual students. That's not families, individual students. And that's not including the exemptions.
Does that include the 4th graders that we would potentially?
It includes those kids that we potentially give exemptions for, yes.
Thank you.
We do hope it has more implementable transportation refinements, fewer split stops, reducing risk of future boundary tweaks. Now, that is not to say I would hope this would stay forever, but that's simply not the case, the way things work. If they decided to put 500 brand new homes in the middle of West Rock Hill, we would have to do something about that. So if in the near future those kind of things happen, I don't imagine that happening in West Rock Hill, but it could, we would certainly have to go back and reconsider what it is we're doing, which is really why the board, we're going to be coming back to you in a few more years to say we're requesting another enrollment study. So we want to look again and continue to predict out those 5 and 10-year increments. And certainly we want to remain strong, equitable experiences across all school districts. And I will say without a doubt, of the responses I've received, I'm just so thankful for people. They love their elementary school. I mean, they really do. Everyone's elementary school is the greatest one in the world, and they cannot leave it. That is what I've learned by reading all of these comments from families. So it's very heartening. So I highlighted here some of the areas that we're going to be looking at. There's a big notch of grass zone being pushed into Siler. We're looking at the area along Guth and West Rock boundary, certainly between Deibler and the Bedminster line, and again along Silverdale, there's a question there about some changes that need to be made. These, again, we had these in the last presentation. It looks very good for us in terms of this. It puts us into the green. Not saying that everything will be perfect forever, but it certainly highlights and makes me feel good that we won't be back at this, changing this in the very near future. Things that we have done, just to make the public aware, the board aware, I included in this breakdown. So not only did we look at the overall utilizations, we looked at by grade level, by year, the number of sections. So at each elementary school, we're looking at the predicted number of students in every single grade level and the number of sections that would generate to ensure that we would have enough classrooms going into the future. We've done that for scenario 6. We actually did this with every model, but I wanted to share with you guys the scenario 6 numbers just so that you have them. Back to the existing attendance zones, and then are the proposed, so that you have them on one page. So you can see the large area of Bedminster that would be moved into Deibler. Although that is very large, I believe that was only about 40 students. And in addition, again, those areas around Guth and the section around Siler. So our next steps, we're requesting that, if the board approves this, we would move forward at the March board meeting with an approval of this. If the board is going to move forward, we would begin implementing this immediately with the next steps of our plans. We've already engaged with TPS to consult with us to finalize the boundaries based upon the feedback we've received from the community. We would need to really reach out to those parents of kids that would be entering grade 5. So we would start that process during the month of March into April. So we would be able to look at our enrollments and be able to contact people by the end of April with final decisions on placement. We would need to do a transportation rerouting beginning in the month of May into June. We typically don't do that till closer to the end of June, but because of these changes, we would start that much, much earlier. Really, the only thing that holds us back from that is our kindergarten numbers. People are registering in kindergarten all the way into July, and some people into August and September. And planning completed on transition activities. That's really going to be the big push. We're working with our principals, with our team. Dr. Bloom has been working with her team, her full-day kindergarten team, to have one of her subgroups that's focused on transition activities and making those family connections. So we would set up receiving school visits to host families and events to get to know them. I think the big question for a lot of people is, do we have to do this? Is this something that we have to move forward? The answer is no. If we didn't want to do this, and the board said, absolutely, we can't make these kind of things happen, there are alternatives, and the impact would be a few things. We would need to really look at our class size guidelines and think about, are those appropriate max class size? What do we do if we begin to exceed those within schools? Consider adding support staff into schools where we're exceeding the maximum size. We need to think about, consider changing our configurations. That is, do we need dedicated STEM, music, and art spaces? I was at an elementary school with my kids that had, they lost the computer lab, they lost the TV place, they lost the art room because we were in a situation we were really, really overpopulated. And you can do art on a cart. You can make those specials itinerant. Could we move programs around? Yes, we could move autistic support, emotional support programs, learning support. We can reach out to see if we can start moving kids around. Potentially, could we look at construction? Yes, but construction takes a long time and it's costly. And I don't think it would be a good recommendation for the board to go building at one school when we have excess spaces at other schools. So that certainly isn't something I would recommend, but it's something that is an alternative the board could consider. Questions?
I have a couple questions around, like, if we do nothing in this scenario.
Sure.
When we talk about moving programs, do we have enough space in another school to move the entire program, or would it be more likely a scenario that, like, a program that exists in one school may get split into two and put in two different schools?
We would have to look at any of those options. I think we would have to play it by ear to see what we would be able to do. And we would need to work with Mr. Johnson, with our special education team. I think we'd probably reach out to the IU about best practice.
I'm just thinking, like, I just don't know schools who have space to take a whole one. That aren't
Especially
already
when
using
special
the
ed numbers
space.
are going up.
Yeah.
So that it's a matter of
Yeah, I mean,
shifting.
I will say, although the number of kids has gone down, the number of special education students has actually gone up. So we really need to take that into consideration. Education is it's different today than it was 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. We have more students with special needs. We need places to pull kids out. We need resource rooms. We need places for learning support. We have more autistic students than we've ever had in the history. So we need to look very closely at those programs. They take up space. So it's something that we have to account for. Now, I'm not, recommending we get classrooms and put 40 desks in it and just put 40 second graders in there. I don't think that's good for kids or teachers or anything.
If we chose not to go forward with the rezoning this year, when would we be back at this same conversation?
Next year,
Thought so.
I'll come back to you with the same request.
With option 6, it's proposed that we accept, would the ES and AS programs stay in the schools that they're in right now? Would the ES and AS students, I guess, would they be subject to being moved around?
It's still a possibility. I don't want to say absolutely 100%. I think we have to look very closely what our needs are. Grass in particular is a place where we're tight. They don't have a space for OT, PT. They have a lot of ELD kids. They don't really have a space that's dedicated for that. We're using spaces. They're very creative. They do a great job, but it's not ideal.
Thank you.
I did just want to highlight some things to the community. I've been working very closely with Brad. I just wanted to thank him because this is obviously something that us, the board, and we're listening to the community. It is not an easy decision to go through, even though we've been given data. Like Brad has worked extensively over looking at the data, getting the feedback of parents, community members, board members. There's a lot to look into because these are our students, these are our families, this is their education. But I do want you to know that it's come with a lot of background work. Not only did we get this enrollment study and utilization study. But we have Brad who's driving around because we've gotten emails of saying, this isn't really working because there's a bridge, and he's out there and saying, you know what, yeah, we got these studies, but I am noticing these things. I am noticing that maybe we move the line over here, that maybe this neighborhood, it makes sense what they're saying. Like is not only the survey that we've gone over 208 that he's looked at, but also all of the emails that we're carefully looking at. It's not this like copy and paste response. It's really looking at what are these families saying? How is this affecting them? And he is truly doing, I believe, the best to look at every angle how this can be best for our students. In the ideal world, we wouldn't want to do that, right? Because we understand this is the school that our children go to, that we go to, that we've been invested in. So I think that's why he really is looking at it. And I believe the board, because we've had conversations of the thoughtfulness, like really keeping in mind, how is this going to affect it? And then when and if this does happen, how do we help our students? How do we help our families? So he has been looking at like the neighborhoods, looking at the parent concerns, the comments, anything like that. I really do believe we've tried our best as a board, as administration, but especially Brad, like the amount of work, and that's what we want, right? I guess my point is that's what we want. We don't want someone to just get a study that we've paid for and say, yep, that's it, this is what we're gonna do. No, it's the nitty-gritty of looking at the lines, and even with this, with what he's saying, even if we do pass or we vote for this, it's not fine, he's still fine-tuning it. So I just wanted to let you know that as a board, as admin, Brad, we're really taking all of what you guys are saying into consideration. Please don't think that it's at all something easier. We're not listening to you. We really are trying our best to figure out what is best for our students, for the families. But I just wanted to thank Brad for this continuous work, because I know it's not done, but just the amount. And this is not the only thing that he does. So I really want to.
It was an
point that out.
education driving around. I got lost in Sellersville.
So just so you know, like what's happening in the background, right? Like this isn't something that's just like, oh, we're just going to do this. No, this has taken time, consideration, our questions, your questions. So.
And I encourage people still, the board wants this to move forward. We are going to dig in and be working on this. So we're not going to finalize this until it's final. We're okay with the decisions that are going to be made. And as I said, we'll be back at this in another few years to redo the study, look at how things are changing. Penn Ridge, as I've told the board, it's not a place where young families are necessarily coming in at this point. There's a lot of retirees here. What you've seen, the decreases in here. Doesn't mean that couldn't happen. You could suddenly have a surge of families moving in and an increase of 500. That could potentially happen. Maybe if the rates go down, I don't know. But it's a possibility.
Dr. Palmer, if you could go back to slide 4 with the enrollment study projections. So just want to echo some of Ms. Sharino's sentiments as well. So as you know, we had an enrollment study done. The last time an enrollment study was conducted, I believe, was in 2017. Is that correct, Dr. Palmer?
Yes.
I don't know, and I'm not throwing shade on any prior administration, I don't know if it was acted upon, meaning were there any decisions. But if you look at the trend line there, so you have in 2018, district had over 7,000 students. Right now, we're hovering just above 6,000 students. That didn't happen overnight. So we had this enrollment study done by Pennsylvania Economy League with the assistance of Breslin Architects, who went not only looked at the enrollment trends, population here, but also looked at building capacity. It would be irresponsible for us not to bring a recommendation forward to the administration. We realize may not be perfect, and that's why we are taking painstaking efforts to listen to your feedback, because we receive phone calls, we encounter parents in our travels, but also read every single email, create a frequently asked question page, and we're continuing to hear your voice because we know that it does impact our greatest asset, our kids. And we know the emotionality involved. And we know that you, as Dr. Palmer shared earlier, everyone seems to love their elementary schools. We haven't heard, oh, great, we're being moved to another elementary school. That has not hit our radar. So these are very, very tough decisions, but I just want to emphasize again, it would be irresponsible if we did not make a recommendation for consideration to our Board of School Directors. So this is not finalized yet. If it's the board's will that we hold off, pause a year, this problem will not be going away, though. Meaning some buildings will be filled to capacity or over capacity, while other buildings are under capacity. And these are decisions that we will have to be tough decisions for us to make. So does it make sense to maybe move a boarder and reassign students to a different school? Or do we build? Do we bring in trailers? Do we do these other types of things? Do we, as Dr. Palmer shared, have art on a cart instead of a dedicated classroom? And I know we keep picking on art, but we would have to make some tough decisions internally on how to deliver the best program and the best instruction possible. So this has taken an inordinate amount of time to try our best to provide the public and the school board with a lot of information here to consider and digest here. So it's still a work in progress, and we're going to do our best to do best by our students here, ultimately. So I'd like to thank you for all the work. We could easily sit on our hands, make a recommendation, let's build a wing onto it, and you will steadily see our expenditures go up with capital planning, and it doesn't, if we were to build or modify any schools, that takes a lot of time with zoning and permits and going out to bid. We think this is the most efficient recommendation, even though we're still working, but if it lands on scenario 6, we're still fine-tuning, making tweaks, but we are making this with the best information that we have today. And we will have another enrollment study done in a few years from now so we can make preparations to do the best we can for our students.
Any other questions?
No, but I have a comment I'd like to make. First, it's been said, but I also want to echo the thanks to everybody who's sent emails, all the families that have reached out. I was saying the other day, seemed pretty early on, the emails that we got were, how dare you do this? But when the reply came back, the very thoughtful reply of, we haven't done anything yet, we're asking for feedback, the conversations were very constructive. We've heard from a lot of different families. I think every day we've got multiple emails from families saying about, this is how it's going to impact my family, this is, so on and so forth. And just that engagement with the community is very much appreciated, that we can have that instead of being, this high and unreachable governing body. We are people who are part of this community. The other thing that I also want to mention is that I think every one of us are parents of students in the district, at least 2 of us. These plans will affect our kids as well. We understand the impact this is going to have on families because there are scenarios where it directly impacts ours. So I just want to reassure, please continue to voice that, please continue to share that, but I just want to make sure that the public understands this is not an abstract thing for the board. This is not something that is happening to somebody else. This is something that is also happening to our families as well. So that's all I wanted to say.
Next on the agenda is with Mr. Ernest. We'll be talking about phones, focus, and the future, a community conversation.
All right, while he finds the slide for that one, I think I have the flyers memorized. It's also out front.
Tenth revision.
The event, phones, focus in the future, community conversation. You're probably gonna find a flyer. It's on Wednesday, the 4th, from 6:30 to 8:30 in the green gym. We're gonna have some signage around, because there seems to be some confusion on where the green gym is, so we will definitely let you know. I did address this, sir, on our February 3rd committee meeting, and I described what the program will be like. The new wrinkle has been added. We have 2 teachers that have agreed to be a part of the program. They're going to speak to their classroom experience. One who's always here, who just left, I was going to put her out, ask her to stand up and give a speech, but she probably anticipated that. That's why she left. So we have 2 high school teachers that will actually be presenting during the program. One teacher in particular was at the middle school and has now been at the high school for, I believe, a year or 2. So we are very much looking forward to this program. I believe we have a little over 50 teachers signed up right now. Remember that word, remember the word PLT, professional learning time. I anticipate anywhere from 60 to 70 teachers based on prior attendance at different events. But we are hoping you, the community, comes out to this event, in particular, parents of elementary school students and middle school students. Not that we don't want high school parents to come, but I think the focus really is on considering how soon you give smartphones to your children, and that's why we really want to see elementary and middle school parents attend this event. The event, we will not be judging you, we will not be querying you about, did you give your kid a cell phone in 4th grade? And then shaming you. We're not going to do that, I promise. We're going to have what the flyer actually states, a community conversation about what you should be considering, the overall impact on kids. And as those bulleted statements show, this is what the conversation is going to be about. A part of it will be Q&A. Part of it will be a lot of interaction between you and your fellow parents. We will not be speaking at you during this event. It's really going to be interactive and dynamic. Any questions from the board?
Are parents encouraged to bring students with, or is this more focused on parents and guardians?
We would love either. So if you feel like great question, if you feel like you want to bring your kids so they can hear it, we're not going to be making any decrees about here's what you should be doing. Again, this is really about a conversation, but if you think it would be worthwhile for your kids, absolutely, please bring them.
Yeah, I think the talk around the legislation of, keeping phones out of schools has created a lot of conversation, and this would be, hopefully we can get more parents to come in, because the problem really isn't kids using phones in the schools. The problem is kids using phones when they're not at school. So the problems that we have in school primarily stem from things that are happening at night, in the community, on the bus ride, and elsewhere. So it's a broader conversation than just phones in schools.
And if you have time on your hands, please review Senate Bill 1014. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we end the student services, I know some people came in, so I didn't know if anyone else, even though it's not, does anyone else want to talk about anything? Oh,
Did you guys sign up to speak?
if anyone is interested in speaking about the rezoning, anything on student services, you're welcome to come in, say your name, and I'll read just wait one second. Let me just. So according to policy 903, public comment on matters of concern, official action, or deliberation is limited to 3 minutes. Should be directed to the entire school board following the announcement of your name and municipality. Under this policy, the presiding officer has the authority to warn or stop a public commenter when violation of this policy occurs. So we'll start with Mrs. Sipe. Just say your name and your municipality, please.
My name is Tara Sipe, and I live in Silverdale Borough. And I'm asking about the 4th grades going into 5th grade. My son is a part of that as well. He's also on the 504. In everything I've read, I completely understand all this, but everything I read was about transportation is not going to be provided if you are an exemption, and that you have to provide your own transportation. As a working parent, as a community person, as a coach, myself, that kind of time I don't have. So what happens to those who get the exemptions, but then have to provide their own transportations with working parents? Like, what happens then? So, I ask you to consider some of those, that if our neighborhoods are on those borders that are now being transitioned, and I can speak for my neighborhood, Oak Drive specifically, we have 4 kids, 1 family with 3 kids and my son. And the next several years, you're all the same way. We're a small, small neighborhood. I could drop my kid off at the corner and say, hey, he's at Siler now, sure, but I'm not going to do that because I'm an honest parent. But what do we do then? That's what I'm asking in consideration is how are the transportations for those that are going to be in the exempt going to be handled? Thank you.
Thank you. We have two more people.
Mike?
Mike, Ron. And then Pat, Rudy. Do you want to come up? Yeah, if you could just say your name and municipality, please. Thank you.
My name's Pat Robbins. I have 3 boys, go to Bedminster. Actually, one goes to North right now, so my main concern was, so I'm in Dublin, my main neighborhood's off of Saddlebrook Drive, so you're just being impacted. And there's, again, very similar on your instance of, there's 4 kids in my neighborhood, one of which would be going into 5th grade, so he'd be pretty much exempt on the transition. There's not much growth in our older neighborhood at this point. So I was just curious, and I know that there's no line changes with middle schools, but my main issue was splitting up. My boys would ultimately go to Siler in this flip. I think it was either for both 5 and 6 proposals, but then they would ultimately be shifted back to North and not even be attending from the elementary school students back to the children from Divler and Penridge, Bedminster. So basically, that was my main issue is you shift these 4 kids out, call it a couple more coming up, and then ultimately go into an elementary school and then pulled out from that group of kids back into the North Territory. So I was curious if there was any proposals in the future of altering those middle school lines.
Thank you. Is that it? Okay. Also, I'd like to add that if anyone has any more comments, concerns, please feel free to email us. You can email us on the board, and I will definitely get it to Dr. Palmer. Our email address is psdschoolboard@penridge.org. If you have any more questions or comments. And again, with what Mr. Lefevre said, we thank you, everyone that's here, everyone that's listening, everyone that's made comments, filled out the surveys. We really appreciate hearing from you. So moving on, the next Student Services Committee is scheduled for Monday, April 8th. Our next committee will be Curriculum Committee, led by Mr. Merkelbaum.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have any public comment for Curriculum Committee, unless anyone in the public had intended for that. In which case, I will hand this meeting over to Dr. Blue.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening to those at home who are listening as well. My name is Jennifer Bloom, and I'm going to be providing a middle-of-the-year data update along with representatives from the Department of Teaching and Learning. So if I could have those people join me up here, if you don't mind. I'll just quickly introduce the team that's joining me this evening. First, we'll ask the board for a little bit of grace in the fact that you'll probably see us play a little bit of musical chairs here. We'll have prepared our presentation, but that does require some of us to jump in and jump out for a few opportunities. We also had some questions posed when we originally put the presentation out, and we'll be addressing those questions as we go through the presentation this evening. And again, we've already intentionally planned for that, which is why you may see some in and out. So bear with us as we come to and from the microphone this evening. Okay, so this evening, as I said, this will be our middle of the year data presentation. Just a couple of terms to know. The first that we've put up here for the committee this evening, as well as the community, the PSSA is the Pennsylvania System of School Assessments. It's our state mandated exams in English and Language Arts, mathematics, and science. So if your child is in anywhere from grades 3 to 8, they will be participating in the PSSA later this year. We also have Keystone assessments, also state mandated, and they are in the courses of literature, literature, Algebra 1 and biology, and that is one of the pathways toward graduation. So that is a potential graduation requirement, and those happen in the high school. You can take an Algebra 1 Keystone exam in middle school in certain cases. We also talk about something called PVAS data, which is Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System. That is what PVAS stands for. And it's just a statistical measure of student growth over the years. It helps us make predictions for future performance. It's used for school improvement. So that is another term that we use in the Department of Teaching and Learning to look at growth indicators as we move forward. And you'll also hear us make reference to the Future Ready Index this evening, which is a collection of school progress measures. And Keystone's, the data is best used to score by 11th grade, and you'll see some of that in our projections and data this evening. So back in the beginning of the year, we had the opportunity to present to you our beginning of the year data, which also included results from the 24-25 PSSA and Keystone assessments. Tonight, we'll present to you some of the comparison data between our district and districts that have similar makeups to our district, as well as present to you our district data as to where we are in RELA, math, and science at this point of the year. And then we'll also be able to add to you some predictions and projections for PSSA as we get ready to take those exams in just another couple of weeks. So our first slide this evening is talking about our ELA PSSA achievement comparison data. So you'll see the bar graph all the way to the left is Penridge School District from the years of 2020 all the way up until last year, 2025. You will see a 10% decline from 24 to 25. If you did chime into our meeting last month, we did a pretty detailed dive into what we felt were the root causes of the declines that we've seen, as well as pinpoint what we are doing to proactively address these measures as we move forward. You're going to hear tonight from Meg Burke to talk a little bit more about that with our PSSA scores from last year and the really admirable work she's doing to continue to move that work forward and move the needle forward with RELA as we approach state assessments this year. So you will see, as we said, we had that decline. It does mirror that broader statewide downward trend. We talked about that before, that from all of the Linkit data we've collected from all the districts that they use as well, there's been a decline across the state in the ELA PSSA. We do have some thoughts as to why that's been happening, especially in the last year or so with the 10% decrease. And Meg, I'll have you come up in just a moment to talk about that. We do remain above the state average, and we are in line currently with Bucks County. But it is something that we are looking at. So Meg, I'll turn it over to you briefly just to talk about that 10% decline.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. Although I was not here 2 years ago when I started to look at the data for Penridge across 5 years, actually, what I noticed was that there was a trend in certain eligible content standards that weren't growing across the board in grades 3-8, actually. And what that told me is that that was a program problem, that we were not strengthening core programming to meet the needs of our students over 5 years of time, which is where that decline's coming from. Now that we have in place, under Dr. Bloom's leadership, these short-term goals to explicitly address these eligible content standards that are now priority standards, and to make those common in the ways that we teach them in our classroom through explicit instruction, we really anticipate seeing growth and not a decline in those 10% scores that you were looking at from 2 years ago. I also want to point out, looking at the scores across the Commonwealth, we saw a decline across the Commonwealth, and it also had a lot to do with the students in our classrooms, that our demographics were also changing, which does impact how students perform, especially on our English language assessment or PSSA score. And I can talk more about that in more detail when I start to present to you some of the student achievement data.
See, I told you, musical microphone. So that's a little bit about the ELA PSSA there. We also did break this down for you by program. So you will see at the bottom here our economically disadvantaged population is currently performing above the county and the state right now. It's not a number that we want to stay at. We don't want to live, at that 41%, but we are trending above currently the county and the state. Our special education population, again, performing above the county and the state. Our EL population is not. And again, you'll hear from our coordinator of ELD and federal programs this evening, Carly Baker. She's super excited to come to this microphone. But she'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to be able to continue to enrich the experience for our EL students as well. We did have a request to make sure that we didn't just show historical data from 1 year past, so we did add an additional slide. If you were following us over the last week, we do usually post our presentations about 1 week out. If we have any type of adjustments, we do make that notification, put that out as well. So we were able to add this slide in too, so you could see from 2020 through 25 what our RELA scores had looked like in PSSA over those last 5 years. And again, as Meg gets into more of her presentation, we'll do some direct pointing as to why we think these numbers are where they are and what we have been doing these past 8 months to hopefully make gains and improvements as we get into our state testing season coming up shortly. You'll see the same here. This is our math PSSA achievement comparison. Again, over the last 5 years, we had a decent increase here over the last 5 years in mathematics. We went from 41% to 55%, which outpaced our growth of our economically disadvantaged peers and the IU by about 1%. We'll take that 1%, okay, and be happy about the fact that we are outpacing there. And then we still remain above the county and the state average for our PSSA scores here. Again, that does not mean that we look at these scores and think 55% proficient advantage is perfect, excellent, wonderful, great. It just means that's where we are and that's where we'll grow from. So that is something that you will hear our K-12 math supervisor, Mike Gurish, speak about momentarily, about where we are and why we believe we're there, and then what we're pointing to be able to continue to move that work forward. Again, the work is admirable that he's been implementing with his team, much aligned with what Ms. Burke has been doing in really consistent, intentional instructional routines, consistent use of academic language, and just really making sure we keep those priority standards at the forefront of our instruction. You'll see us broken down here again by subgroups here, by program. So our economically disadvantaged our economically disadvantaged population, our ELs, and our special ed students. Again, performing all above comparison groups in math right now with our special ed population, and we are performing above the county and state for our economically disadvantaged population. Here is that same graph going back to 2020 all the way through current 2025. All of the data is there for you to take a look at. You can see that the years that we've made some growth, some years that we maybe have plateaued, some years that we've declined. And again, we'll be pointing all to this more specifically when each supervisor gets into their program as well. But we did want to make this transparent for the community. I am going to turn over now to our Stacy Clemmer. Stacy Clemmer is our data instructional coach, and I just need to take a moment to recognize her efforts. She is just a guru of working within the quantitative data that makes up our data story of Penridge School District. She is constantly looking for new ways to be able to get this data to teachers, to principals, to coaches, to supervisors, so that we can use data to make intentional instructional change within our classrooms. So I just needed to put that out there. She makes me better at what I do each and every day, and that is a huge compliment to her, and I'm very grateful for her work. So I'm going to just turn it over to her for a moment to speak about the keystones.
So something that's a little bit different about this data is you'll notice it says the date of 24-25 literature. That is your cohort of kids that were in 11th grade in 24 and 25, not the kids that took the keystone in 24, 25. So when the state looks at this data, and you'll see it in the next couple of slides, it's a little different than what we see in the PSSAs. So the way the state does it is, and it's the same for the Future Ready Index when we look at that when we're talking about rankings on a statewide level, they take the scores at the end of 11th grade, the best score that student did, and that's what they grade us on in terms of what we're looking at here. So the 24-25 is actually your current seniors. So you will see some data in the future looking at the cohorts from 27, 28, so you can kind of see the progression as those kids move through the years. So yeah, this looks much better in terms of literature because you can see we went from 65 to 77%. A little bit different than what it looks like perhaps if you're just looking at the Keystone scores from last year.
So what Stacy's saying is that the students have a bank score, so they get a couple shots of taking the retest for graduation. There's some other pathways to graduation as well, but we are encouraging, we think this is the easiest for students to get a proficient or advanced on the Keystone Lit. So again, this is a banked score.
Oh, going in the wrong direction, my apologies. So I want to look at this real quick. Dr. Bloom had mentioned earlier about PVOS. It's something that I'm getting into and looking more into. I'm familiar with it from a teacher perspective because that's one of the ways that I am graded on how my performance is by the growth of my students. So this is not actually a prediction of how the students are going to do. So there are two different things going on here. Achievement, which is how well our students do on a test at a specific time, and growth, which is how far we've brought those students. So if you have a student who is a lower achieving student, they may have a lot of growth. So if you have a student performing on a 5th grade level, and in that 1 year, say they're in 7th grade, they are able to make 2 years or 3 years worth of growth, they still may not be hitting that 1,500, which we'll talk about in a minute and what that means, but they have grown a lot. So in this chart right here, and there are 3 of them, one for each of the Keystones, we can get them for the PSSAs, but I wanted to focus on this. 1,500, that horizontal line, that is what the Keystone proficient is. That's where we want our kids to be. So for literature, you see the yellow star is Penn Ridge. Our average score is above that. All right, so our students on average are achieving above the 1,500. To the right, if you go out to the right, that's showing growth. So if a student comes into 5th grade and leaves ready to go to 6th grade, that student would be on 0 because that's the growth that is expected. If a student does more than that or better than that, then our numbers will push out to the right. Hence why our star is pushed out to the right, which means we're doing better than average or better about doing growth for the students.
So our students are growing and they're also doing better than the 1,500.
Yeah, so the goal is to be in that top right quadrant. You want to add something in?
I think that we may have just addressed the one question that came up, but you want to go ahead? I think we just addressed that one question.
Yeah.
One question that was raised, if you don't mind,
Go
if I
ahead.
just jump in. You know, how do we improve, right? How do we continue to grow students based on this data? And what do we have in place to do that? And one of the things we looked at with Stacy's help are achievement trends across the district, particularly in 9th and 10th grade, knowing that the students take that English Keystone exam in 10th grade, but what's happening before they take it? What are we measuring? And so we had to really be intentional and really look at what I call, again, our high priority standards. Where are students historically underperforming over time, over 5 years' time in some of these standards? And how do we increase that really explicit instruction in our classroom? And so one of the things we did is we set instructional strategies directly aligned to these eligible content standards to really watch where kids can grow with targeted instruction around those standards. And we're really leveraging our instructional coaches to begin to do that work. And those include close reading strategies, the rigor that kids are being asked to read really critically on their own and independently and write about text on the Keystone exam, which counts as a large portion of their grade. How often and much are we doing that? The other thing is our targeted vocabulary instruction. We're looking at this, you know, are we consistent in our explicitness in when we teach some of these standards? And then, of course, being data-driven. Data-driven remediation, we're leveraging one of our coaches, Anita Whalen, to go into our high school classrooms and really look at the data that's being produced, coming from benchmarks, coming from these predictive measures on our Keystones, and even using IXL to really target some of those skills and assign skill plans to students that meet them where they are. And so we're also progress monitoring that growth over time. And we're even creating a field test in Linkit for them to take aligned to this to see if that instruction actually worked. So I just wanted to really call out the work of the team and the dedication of our coaches and our teachers.
And I
Thank you.
appreciate that. I appreciate it, because I know I've hit up a lot of these questions. I appreciate all of your answers to
Absolutely.
it.
Yes.
And I did it more so, because a lot of times, like, we may get the answers, but I think it's important for the community to understand that. But I really do, like, I have to say, I commend all of you and Dr. Bloom with seeing, like, the data-driven, the intentional, the consistency, the targeted instruction. And I know we're talking right now about high school, but I even see, like, the things that you're implementing. I mean, even at my elementary children, I got a packet this year that I've never gotten before that says how, it's very specific of how they're doing with certain tests. And I think it informs us as parents as how we can also help, because I always feel like it's a relationship we have with the student, the parent, the teacher. So I really appreciate you answering my question.
For those who may be wondering why you didn't get that packet, I will just share. Thank you for that, Ms. Sherino. So we piloted this year under our new multi-tiered system of support. It's very important that parents partner with us for the success of their child. You don't know what you don't know unless we tell you. So we wanted to be able to send home, as a pilot, the scores and the results from the screeners and the progress monitoring that we're doing to track students' progress. And I'll be honest, it's really scary at first to send that kind of information home to parents because we understand it. We speak that language. So if we send it home at the first time and parents look at it and they're like, oh my gosh, what is this? What does this mean? Teachers get a little nervous, like, oh my gosh, they're all going to call and it's going to be 30 phone calls. I don't know what to say. So we really tried to work through what that could look like. And Mr. Rowe did a wonderful job with his team of sending home that first opportunity for parents to look at it. We received great feedback. We had the opportunity to reflect on it. And then all parents can expect that level of communication next year through a multi-tiered system of support. It'll just be the way in which it comes home. So I appreciate you calling that out, and that gives me a chance to recognize Siler as well. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, because I think it starts there, because then we're seeing that. We're not going to have, it's that intentional, right? We're looking at it, and it's not just one and done. It's consistently, and I know you say this all the time, Dr. Bloom, it's that consistent, it's that intentional, and I'm seeing it in my own students. So, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, so keeping on with the theme of Keystone, in the elementary PSSA, this chart was split, but for the high school and Keystone, I can put it together. So you can see the longitudinal for the economic disadvantaged group and the special ed group. And you'll notice that EL is missing, and it is on all of the Keystones, because this data comes to us from Linkit, from the Future Ready Index. And the Future Ready Index doesn't pull data unless you have a group that is more than 20 students. So so far at the high school, for any one grade level per se, we don't have 20 students that are taking the same Keystone. So at this point, that's why we don't have any EL data, according to the state. It's not that we don't have the students, we just don't meet their minimum. So that is, and you can see again, in the two groups, we are performing better than or equal to the state and the county, and even our special ed population is doing better than our peers. So that's nice to see. Moving into algebra, which is my passion. Some of you might not know, I was a teacher at the high school in math, and so algebra is my jam. I'm really excited to see the growth that we're seeing here in algebra. We'll speak to it, Mr. Gurris and I will speak to it a little bit later on why some of this growth is so extreme. But as of now, we have increased. We're still moving towards getting to our peers, but we're definitely where we need to be in terms of the county and above statewide. Mr. Gurris, is there anything you want to add to this slide? I kind of explained it according to the literature, what they all mean, but I don't know if you want to add something.
Say a couple words exactly. Okay. Mike Gurris, I'm the math supervisor. I'm jammy in math as well. So the one thing I just wanted to point out with this slide again, there was a question about that being below average, where that star is. Again, just to reiterate what Ms. Clemmer talked about, we're below the 1,500, but there are actually more dots below us, so therefore we're not below average, but we're still not where we necessarily want to be. Growth, we're very far to the right. We're very pleased with that. The one other thing just to point out, again, going back to this is our students who were juniors in 2025. So when we're looking at Algebra Keystone students, we're going back to their students making up that yellow dot who took that Algebra Keystone in 2021, 2022, and 2023. So just keep that in mind, just the way that they come out with data their junior year. That doesn't always tell the picture of where we are right now. But the key on that slide is just the amount of growth that we're seeing.
And then, again, here is the achievement by program. Also, there's some improvement for our economically disadvantaged students. I think we're doing much better on the special ed front. I'm going to leave you to look at the numbers. I don't have much to say. Biology, there was a slight decrease for our juniors to 58%. We're above the state average, and we're closely aligned with Bucks County. I'm just gonna go to this one real quick because that's 10. What I'm really excited about this to see is we are above proficient in our averages, so that means our 9th grade teachers are doing a great job of preparing our kids for the Keystone, while still also having a lot of growth. So that's great. Add more to that.
Thank you. Christine Tamburino, K-12 Science Supervisor. Great to see everyone tonight. I did just want to speak to this because a question had come up because on our previous slide, I think I'm going to go in the right direction. There we go. We had seen kind of a trending dip, a slight dip essentially, but in a slide that's forthcoming, we are going to see that we are trending to showing greater progress on the biology keystone. So I look forward to speaking to that with you.
And I think, okay, Mrs. Baker is going to come and talk about ELD, but right now this is kind of the historical look at how the programs have done in biology. And Ms. Baker, you want to talk about, is it? You got it? Okay. And then
I just want to introduce Carly Baker. I've known her for quite some time, and her work and her voice for our English language development students. And she's going to talk to you about some of the highlights of our programming here at Penn Ridge. And I turn it over to you, Carly.
Thank you. It's great to speak with you all tonight. My name is Carly Baker. I am going to tell you a brief overview of who are our English language learners in our district. So we currently serve around 220, 230 English learners. They are in all 11 of our school sites. If you put it in perspective, that's about 1 in 26 Penn Ridge students is an English learner. We have around 27 different home languages that our students speak. About 2/3 are Spanish speaking. We also have Arabic, Gujarati, and Russian as our top languages. Our students are from all over the world. But the majority are born in the United States. We also have students from Central America, Central Asia, and Mexico. Looking at the graph on the side of the screen up here, you can see that we have it sorted by school and proficiency level. So every year, students take what is called a WIDA Access language proficiency test, and that ranks students between a 1, which is like a newcomer, to a 6, which is like a near native-like proficiency. And we use that data to help us to determine student services and how much ESL or ELD support they get from our ESL certified specialists. So just looking at the graph, you can see that the elementaries are green, middle is pink, I love pink, and Penn Ridge High School is blue. The majority of our students are at Bedminster, Grass, and the high school. And then I broke it down by our WIDA level. We have around 45 beginner students new to English. 71 intermediate and 73 advanced. And just to give you an idea of language proficiency and how long it takes to grow to be near native-like, it takes 1 to 2 years to have that social language. That's the type of language that you hear on the playground, in the hallway with friends, and then 5 to 7 years to have academic language, and that's the language that you hear and use in our classrooms, just to put it in perspective.
I will just say what a great job Carly's doing this year as our federal programs coordinator. She's doing a fantastic job, and she's the face that families see when they come in to register new families of English learners. So I popped in, she was having a conversation with the family in Spanish when I got in this morning, so she does a wonderful job.
There were some questions about our ELD improvements and some communication with our ELD families. And starting in 2024-2025, Penridge adopted Talking Points, which is a multilingual two-way communication tool. And it has increased equitable access for our multilingual learners and their families. In a mid-year report, 85% of our multilingual families here at Penridge said that they could access Talking Points and that they also received communication from the schools. We are performing, when compared to other districts at or above the same size, we are performing above them in the usage of Talking Points. We're reviewing building level data currently, and we're really looking at our coaching staff on being proactive and increasing our outreach to be more equitable for our families. Carly and I pulled recently some Talking Points data and usage from Penridge, and I'm proud to say that we have, in terms of points of communication just this school year, 12,892 points of communication for our multilingual families. We have 1,339 direct messages sent by families, 2,641 direct messages sent by staff, and 2,680 direct messages sent by school administrators. We have over 300 licenses for Talking Points, and as I mentioned, under Carly's leadership and passion for our students, this continues to increase. So we're really proud of the work that she's doing for us. We had a few other questions, so I'll turn it over to you, Carly.
So the question was raised, is information easily accessible to our English learner families? And our data does indicate, as Meg just mentioned, that our information is increasingly available for them. Not only do we have Talking Points, as Meg mentioned, it's a two-way communication platform, so we're not just sending information out, they can also reply directly to us. So that is increasing our availability to have that open communication with our families. We have a newly adopted, as of last year, 24-25, formal translation protocol. That helps us to make sure those required documents for federal compliance are being sent home to our families in the languages that they understand. We also have availability for interpretation services. We use a service called Language Line, which is essentially a three-way call with a qualified interpreter. And I have yet to come across a language that Language Line doesn't service. So it works for us, even those rare languages, we are able to help our families. Also, speaking of Talking Points, it allows us to attach a PDF, like a flyer or a s'more, and that then gets translated through the program to our families, increasing that equitable access to our communication. And we continue to do this throughout the year. We've trained K-12 staff at transportation, office secretaries, nursing, and just recently last week at new teacher induction, a focus was on ELD and how we communicate with our families. Another question, sorry, forgot. How do they get our school messenger notices? So when somebody goes to send a school messenger message, they can select to translate through a checkbox, and that goes through our student information system. When families register with us, they select their home language, and through our student information system, it talks with School Messenger to make sure that that message goes out to families in their home language. And our IT team has confirmed that we are using this translation feature and it's functioning properly. So we are sure that families are getting information in the language they understand through School Messenger. And I did mention Talking Points. I love Talking Points, so I could talk about it forever. But it also helps us with families who are not necessarily literate in their first language. So they can orally respond to a message, and they can also hear our message by pressing play, and it helps with equitable access. And the last question that I have, and then I'll pass it off to Meg, is do they have a way to easily access teachers and staff? And again, I think Talking Points has been a great resource for us to be able to increase the communication. It can go to families as an app they can download on their phone for free, and it also goes out as a text message. So I've had staff tell me, I've been trying to get in communication with XYZ for a week. I sent 1 Talking Points and I got a message back within minutes. And so I've really seen good results from our staff about Talking Points. And then lastly, we have our traditional contact translation services, such as phone and email. We can translate and use our language services like Talking Points and Language Line. And every school office we just started last year, nursing and the front office, even here at registration, have an iPad with Google Translate on it, so we are ready for when families walk through our doors.
Just one last question. Do we ever survey our ELD families to see how we can improve educating their students and communicating with families? Yes. We surveyed our ELD families towards the end of the 24-25 school year, and the results were largely positive. Families reported high satisfaction with their child's progress in learning English, with the vast majority indicating that they felt very supported and very satisfied. Overall, the results indicate that families feel, like I had mentioned, supportive, informed, and able to communicate effectively while also providing us with feedback so we can continue to strengthen our services. We will continue to send surveys annually and another survey at the end of this year to our families and continue to use that feedback to inform our professional learning and identifying the emerging needs of our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for the answers to those questions. I do have a couple more questions though. When you're saying that you do the survey, what is the percentage of the families, of our ELD families that are actually completing that survey?
Person, but there was about 41 families who had responded to that survey that I had sent.
And how many families do we have?
In total, we have, I don't know exactly how many families, but we have about 220 active English learners that went to. So I would say, give me a
I guess it's kind of hard because, yeah, if you have like 4 kids and it's one family.
It was 41 different contacts, so 41 families.
Right, so yeah, but we don't, okay.
Can I just add, I think that's something we want to add to our family and community survey as well, more broadly, that we're going to be sending out in April. So I think we have a discussion about how we can do that to make sure that we're reaching those families.
Yeah, so we reach out to those families. And what exactly, you talk a lot about Talking Points. Is that a service? What is that? Is that a person? What is that?
It's a two-way communication platform. So it's a nonprofit organization that has an app, more or less, and all teachers have the app on our PSD key, all staff actually. And what it does is it connects to our student information system. And so students who have a home language other than English automatically get a license for Talking Points. And so when teachers or staff would like to reach out to that family, they just go right into the app on their PSD key, search the student's name, and their contacts are already there, ready to send. We would put English, and the service, it does it. It translates for us. It does it through AI, and also they have live translators to verify the accuracy of the message. And then the families can respond in their language via text or through the app, and we get it in English.
So for like Seesaw, you know how some teachers will give to everybody something.
We can do announcements as well.
So if there's an announcement that Liam will be getting in English, and so I would get the same announcement, but it would be in my language.
Correct.
Okay. Also, is that the same thing for s'mores? For the s'more, like when we get it, is it translated to the families in their language?
So SMORE itself does the translation. When you have a document on, like live on the website, more or less, it will automatically translate for the family. At the top corner, you'll see, well, they might have moved it, but somewhere on the SMORE page, they change, technology very often, but somewhere on the SMORE page, there's a button that you can translate, and that's just a feature that SMORE has within itself.
And so when our families come in, they come and see you directly, right? So when they do that, are you giving them that instruction of like, this is what you have to, because like, as a parent, just, it's a lot, but especially as a parent that doesn't know, it doesn't speak English, or how does that, do you go over those things with them?
I do. I have a whole packet with them. I help them register for free lunch if they need it as well. I have QR codes about what is talking points, and it explains it. I have it in Russian, Vietnamese. It's on our website. I have it in 4 languages on there, ready to go, and I help them. Our ELD teachers are also fantastic and supportive of this, so we sat down and planned together what do we need to give families when they come through our doors with access to be successful in our district. And so we really think about the whole student, the whole family. We also give students a backpack with supplies when they register with us. And so we really are trying to set them up in a t-shirt that says Penn Ridge to feel welcome in our community from the start.
And then for conferences, that's when they have that iPad, because they can sit, they're in with them, and then that's when the teachers have the iPad, and that's how that's done?
We have a couple options. There's that iPad. We would prefer to use Language Line, which is that 3-way call. We can put it on speaker. But what we actually have tried to do over the past 2 years is create a list of translators, real people who can come in, who are, what's the word I'm looking for? They have their certifications, thank you. So they're able to come into our buildings as, somebody who are essentially paying to help translate. And we specifically, the ELD teachers will reach out to those on the list for IEP meetings, back to school nights, open houses, any event that we know parents are going to be out. We have them come in.
Yeah, for IEP meetings in particular, it's very important to have a live person there to help because it is so complex. Its Language Line is even hard. So a lot of those we pay for those translation services out of our Title III funds as well. Yep.
And then questions now for the students. So what if a student goes home with homework? The parent doesn't understand it, or how is that dealt with? Because there's the stressors of that and maybe not being able to understand it, or just not having the time. How are our students then given the extra help that they need? How do we support them? Because I think it's sometimes different. So this is really dear to me because I was an English language learner. But I think it's different when you're in elementary. But then in high school, there was a high school, we had here a student that, she didn't know, like, where's the bathroom? Like, there weren't signs. So especially for a high schooler, it's embarrassing. You want to, it's enough stressor to be a teenager, right? You come into a school where no one really speaks your language, and if you do, you feel awkward. So they may feel uncomfortable with maybe asking. So how are we helping our students to make sure, and this is a question that I've asked before, is that when we see data, the majority of the data is from our English language learners. And how about our students that speak English? How about our other students that don't? There may be, let's say, 1 out of 26. So they may bring that data down, but are we really focusing on what they need? Because I don't want them to get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, I can assure you that I'm extremely passionate about these students. I taught at the high school. This is my 10th year here at Penn Ridge, and I've thought about all of those situations. And so what happens when we have a new student, we hook them up with a link leader at the high school, and that's a student who within a week, for a week at least, if they need more time, they are welcome to that. We'll walk them to their classes. We make sure that it's somebody who, if we can find somebody who speaks their language, who would be an empathetic peer as well. We know it would be a good role model for them. And they'll walk them to their classes. They'll hopefully have lunch. If not, we're talking to our students, like who has a lunch, who can sit with our new student. And that's at the secondary, so 6 through 12. We have this procedure in place for our new students. And then we do also utilize all of the like the Honor Society students who are looking for hours to volunteer, to be peers, to help with homework and other academic content, because those are students who are, probably might have had that Algebra 1 course that our students may need some help in to be successful. So, did that answer? Was there anything?
Yeah, and for like the for the students that go home, right? And let's say they don't do their homework or they don't understand it. It's different when you're at school, you have the teacher, but when you go home and you're trying to, how is that incorporated? Are they then able to do the homework at school? Or are the parents able to support them? What does that look like for our students?
And I think all these questions, as Carly speaks about her work that she's been doing to serve our families, and we really start thinking about the questions that you're asking, the curiosities, how are we doing that? How can we do better? And one of the things through an MTSS lens is strengthening Tier 1 and really identifying what students' language goals are, because a language goal is very different in some ways, different than our proficiency goals. And how do we measure their progress, right? And how do we take that access score that they have, and how do we work side by side with our ELD teachers and our general education teachers? How do they work together to build effective instruction and differentiate and accommodate language needs within our classroom? Last week, Carly and I co-facilitated a session again with one of her ELD teachers, with our new teachers. How do we differentiate? How do we accommodate for our students, especially those who are multilingual? And so we're really working on strengthening that within our system so it doesn't live in a person. Because what I find is it's the work of the ELD teacher when it should be the work of the system. And that's what we're trying to strengthen as we move forward into MTSS next year.
So one last question.
Sure.
Sorry. If a child comes in not speaking English, and they're in 3rd grade, for example, is it true, I'm not sure, that they have 1 year and then they have to take like the PSSAs?
That's correct.
And are those PSSAs in English?
Yes, the only portion I can speak to the English language or the PSSA for RELA, we can only translate the directions in Spanish. That's the only way, and they can have certain, it can be read aloud to them, the directions. And so they also are allowed to have accommodations, and Carly, you can jump in on this, and modifications to give them additional supports based on their language needs. And so they've actually just updated what those accommodations are to really be more specific for students who have different areas where they struggle because of their language. And I'll let Carly talk to those.
So students who are taking the RELA, the PSSA, or the Keystone, they have 1 year of being in U.S. schools that they're exempt, allowed to not take that assessment. After that first year for RELA, they have to take it. For both science and math, no exemptions. They could be here 1 day before that testing window, and they have to take that science and math Keystone or PSSA. One accommodation that they do get is students within their first 3 years in U.S. schools can have a translated version in Spanish. Is the only one the state has, although Stacy's been trying to get more. Thank you, Stacy. I think I lost my train of thought, but they have that first 3 years, they can have that math and science in Spanish. We can also hire interpreters, which we have had come in, and they can read aloud the test to them and interpret it for them if they don't speak Spanish within those first 3 years. So there are accommodations that we have created a system. Just last week, I was in a lot of meetings with the IST teachers, the building principals, and we created a decision tree with clear guidance on what accommodations our English learners are eligible for the PSSA and Keystones.
So if we don't, let's say if there's students that don't take the PSSAs, it's not a positive thing looked on our district. Is it different if it's a student that's an English language learner, or it's the same? It's the same. It's not, okay.
So that's the numbers, and understanding why behind
Right.
it is very important when it comes to English learners.
Well, thank you, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little about some of the math data. We spent a good bit of time talking about some of our finals assessments, how we did in the Keystone or in the PSSA, and looking at those final results. And as a department, we take a look at the post-mortem, how did we do on the Algebra Keystone? We look at those standards, and maybe that affects our program, and maybe we look at professional development, or what changes are we going to make to that course. But this is a mid-year program to talk about data, so I want to talk a little bit about what is done during the middle of the year, okay, where we can actually make a change for that student rather than maybe this student is going to be like the student last year. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the benchmarking that happens during the middle of the year. Just a little background. So we have the vocabulary. Renaissance is a program that we use, or a suite of programs we use. So you might hear us have a contract with Renaissance. And within Renaissance, we have what are called the STAR assessments, which I'll give some data on that. That data that students make from those tests inform Freckle, which is a program students use where a teacher can teach a lesson, then give a Freckle assignment that matches up with that lesson they just taught. Or Freckle will look at the data from their assessments and be able to personalize and find out where the student may be strong or weak and be able to develop a program for them. So those STAR benchmarks are given 3 times a year. It's an adaptive assessment. So student A, student B, if they get the question wrong, they would get a different question than the kid who got it right, and it tries to find their strengths and weaknesses. We take that data and we look at it through 2 lenses. So I'll start here with what is called, we apply our district benchmarks. So our district benchmarks are going to be their locally set performance targets. These are often used within an MTSS program to determine are students meeting the core instruction or your tier 1. So that's why these numbers are around 80%, because in any well-functioning MTSS program, you have 80% of your students are in tier 1. These, again, can be adjusted. We take advice from Renaissance as well and have those discussions. I think it was during COVID that they made some adjustments, but these are things that we have control over. So the cut scores that we get on this are at, above benchmark, on watch, intervention, or urgent intervention required. So through an MTSS lens, we look at this and we see that in each of the grade levels, students were moving from an area of not having an intervention necessary to not needing an intervention necessary. The other way that we can look through at this data is through the state math or the state projections. So what happens here is these are research-based, standardized targets. So we have no control over setting these. These are through Renaissance and in their system. And what these do is connect the eligible content standards and make a prediction on their PSSA. So instead of just where our district benchmarks are all about, are they have any weaknesses or any holes? Do we need to put them in interventions, or are they fine in our tier 1? Whereas this is more looking at the eligible content and making predictions as to where they may score on the PSSA. Ms. Burke is going to come up and talk a little bit more on a similar slide. She has a lot of experience with building the PSSA, knowing how that all works, and maybe can speak a little bit to how those scores there, what their prediction, how they actually match up to when the students do take the PSSA. So that's in, there was also a question about this when we put our first slide out about looking in the past years. So this is our MOY, that's our mid-year, middle of year. So for grade 3, and again, as we go across that first line, 54.1, 69.3, 15.2% increase, that's a different group of students. So depending on how you look at that, realize in 2020 or 24, 25, those 3rd graders this year are now 4th graders, so you can look at it that way as you like. But either way, we are seeing an increase across the board at middle school using our Linked benchmarks this year. And then finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about in the middle school. We use the Linked benchmarks. Again, we always talk about Linked here. We're a Linked school. We have Linked as our data warehouse, but then Linked also has a suite of assessments for benchmarking. Linked also has the ability for teachers to make their own assessments and put them in Linked. But these are the built-in Linked benchmarks. We give these 3 times a year. In all cases, as you look across those grades, you'll see those bars on the right where it's 60 to 79% or 80 to 100%. You're seeing large increases, and we're moving students definitely in the right direction there. I don't think it's a coincidence. I'm pretty happy about, as I look at those 3, the 8th grade Linked benchmarks. Last year, one of our priorities was to take a look at our assessments. We went through and changed the typical Math 8 assessments. We had a great team of teachers. Anita Whalen, who was an 8th grade teacher, is now a coach. Megan Portelli, Ian Kays, Christine DeLillo at South, all worked very hard to take a look at our assessments and build things in Linked that matched up with those assessments. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we saw great gains this year, and we're working in the 7th grade, so hopefully we see something similar next year. Ms. Clemmer is going to speak a little bit about Keystones.
I was really excited about this data. Dr. Palmer had asked me to look at keystones by cohort over the years, and so it's exactly what it sounds like. So what's neat about this is starts with the year 25, which were the seniors that graduated last year, and then it's 26, so this is the seniors this year, 27 and 28. And what's interesting to me is across the time, you can see the below basic and basic going down while you're seeing the advanced and the proficient grow up. And that's true across the board for all of the cohorts, which gets me very excited. I do want to make a note. You have to be kind of careful, as Mr. Gurish had mentioned earlier. When you're looking at data like this, especially for the algebra, some of these kids were taking the keystones way long ago. It's like you're graduating seniors 2025 last year. The reason your proficiency numbers are down so low is that was the 7th grade group, which tends to pretty close to 99% of those kids are advanced or proficient on the keystone. We have no scores for them because they didn't take it. And even if they took it afterwards, the state didn't count those. So that's why you see that 33%. You'll see another dip, I believe, in bio because of that situation. No, you will not see a dip in bio. My apologies. No dip, no dip. There won't be that 33% there. Forgetting they don't take them in 7th and 8th grade. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm excited about because it also shows as we're going through, we're also increasing those numbers, as we'll see with the literature, because in 2028, we still have students that are sophomores that will retake it next year, have an opportunity to retake the Algebra Keystone. So that 61% for that cohort should go up next year when those students retake it again.
Fine, Stacy. I'm here to present some of our RELA academic data, and it's pretty timely because today we kicked off RELA across America, across all of our schools. I am wearing a shirt from the high school English department who kicked it off, and they plan on kicking off celebrating literacy and reading at the high school all week. So I'm really proud of my department and the work they put forth. I also have reading specialists in the audience. Their work is magic, where they're teaching our youngest learners how to read, which I think is pretty magical. And this data is going to show that efficacy in that work and that consistency in our data. And so when we look at our DIBELS data and our foundational skills, it's really a risk analysis. Who are our students at risk? Who are our students at or above benchmark? Our kindergartners, 32% of our students at the beginning of the year were at or above benchmark. Middle of year, 53%. And that's an increase of 21%. And that speaks to really strengthening explicit instruction in our classrooms. And it also shows the work happening to really give kids that strategic and intensive support who are not at benchmark yet. Yet is the operative word. It's progress monitoring them. It's giving them that small group instruction, that push-in instruction where their needs are. When we look at first grade, again, we started it in the beginning of year, 50% at or above benchmark, and we're now at 64%. Again, we see that we're reducing the risk, but we're also strengthening tier 1. And so our goal is to continue to push into our classrooms, give students in first grade that individualized attention within their classrooms and within small group instruction. If we look at second grade, again, the beginning of the year is at 60% at or above benchmark. Again, that threshold's really high, and we're at 64% currently in the middle of the year. I'm really proud of the work happening in our classrooms. Our reading specialists spent time looking at this data, disaggregating it, comparing it, and then setting action plans in each of their buildings. And one of the things that they were real advocates for are putting more texts in kids' hands and making sure more texts go home. And so in grades 1 and 2, we're really looking at increasing decodable texts and putting more texts in kids' hands. And I'm just really proud of their work. And thank you for being here tonight. The second slide, Mr. Gersh spoke to this. These are our RELED district benchmarks, and I can show you some district-wide movement happening, and this is the STAR Renaissance that Mr. Gersh was talking about, that we also spoke to earlier in one of our presentations. And if you look at grade 3, they started at 72.5%, and they grew to 79%. And grade 4, 73.5 to 81.4%, and grade 5, 77% to 81.9%. And through an MTSS framework, when we strengthen Tier 1 with explicit instruction, we start to see that 80%, and we already hit it in the middle of the year. What this means for grade 3 is that we see that students are trending towards strong PSSA readiness. Our foundational skill growth that's happening in K2 is likely impacting reading comprehension. And when we get into these grades 3 through 8, we're really measuring reading comprehension. And so what this means for grade 4, it's effective comprehension instruction. I talked to you about that explicit instruction happening. I called it Say Mean Matter, with those close reading, with those common assessments and field tests being built in Linkit that our teachers will be giving in grades 3 to 8 this March. Strong alignment to our priority standards, making the language that we use to address the standards consistent across all of our schools and native to our teachers' tongues. The high transfer of analytical reading routines, that explicitness of what the text says, what it means, and what it matters, we see that evident right now in the middle of the year. Grade 5, I also need to point out here that grade 5, this rigor and complexity of text increases. And so what we're showing now is that rigor is increasing, but our students are maintaining proficiency even at these upper levels. They're strengthening their text analysis and their evidence-based writing routines independently of their teacher. And they're also reducing the regression of risk. They're going forward, not backwards. I did want to point out something about the testing blueprint design. One of the designs of the state test that this does not measure is the writing piece. And that text analysis called text-dependent analysis, which counts as a quarter of the student's grade. And this is not evident in what we're measuring here. And you'll start to see that because we also put it on our field test. So we're going to have data that's live right before they take the PSSA to really align this to the growth that we're seeing in our classrooms. The scoring of it in Linkit is aligned to the scoring on the PSSA blueprint, including the weighting. So we're really excited to look at those results as they come in. Again, the state projections, we talked about this in math, where we were in the beginning of the year. You look at grade 3, and again, these are the real estate projections, right? Those PSSA projections. They were at 65%, and now they're at 70, 68 to 75, and 73 to 75 in grade 5. So our explicit instruction, our district short-term goals, our alignment of common academic language, our common assessments, both in reading and math and science, we're starting to see that impact on student achievement in the middle of the year. To parallel what Mr. Gersh was showing you in terms of 24-25 middle of year, what were our third graders doing last year at this time? Although it's not apples to apples, they were at 68.9%. Currently, they're at 70.9%. In grade 4, 73.8, currently 75.9. Grade 5, 74.4, currently at 75.5. And this growth really speaks to the instruction happening in our classroom, the support of our specialists, our coaches, our building principals, our district short-term and long-term goals, and we're seeing that impact across the board, and I couldn't be prouder of our team. So thank you.
You'll notice here that there's only 3 grades. That's because our 2028 graduates are just taking the Literature Keystone this year. So we will have some data in a week, I hope. The Winter Keystone scores will come back to us, and then we'll have a full report on where that is going next year, because the May Keystones data will come out in the middle of the summer. But again, I think you see some trends here that Mrs. Burke has addressed with the decrease from last year to this year. I do want to say that the decrease to 2027 is the asterisk, because these are the students that we have not had a chance to retest yet. And so those scores will be coming out throughout this year.
I just wanted to add that our RELA middle school benchmarks, our teachers are just finishing them, so I will have that data for you at our April meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello again. And I'm very excited to be able to present our science academic data for the mid-year. This is our first school year utilizing the Steels-aligned Linkit assessments as our benchmarks. And students are showing progress across the board, which we are very happy to see. We have a shift from 56% to 63% at or above proficiency range, with a significant number of students moving into our 80 to 100% performance band. So we're very happy with this progress. We continue to utilize our Steels-aligned resources in the classroom, and we're seeing that translate here. For our 8th grade students, we are seeing similar shifts. Again, this is our first year utilizing the Linkit Steels-aligned assessment, and we're happy to see that students are making progress in our Steels standards. We see a shift from 57% to 68% at or above proficiency, and again, seeing an increase of almost 40 students moving into the 80 to 100% band, which is the progress that we are hoping to see. A lot of positive feedback coming from our teachers who are utilizing the Twig Science resources at the 6 to 8 level, with students kind of being more familiar with the routine and the expectations of that coursework. So very happy to continue to present this and our future data to you.
One more last Keystone plug. So this is what bio has looked like over the years, and I'm really excited. I have to say, as a high school teacher, I was a little concerned about what Keystones would look like going to block. And I was so proud of the bio teachers because they did an amazing job. I know they were nervous being able to get everything that they wanted to cover within the time frame, and they did an awesome job. And it's the best numbers this recent class of 2028, your current sophomores, than we've seen in the last few years. So I'm very excited to see how they build on this year upcoming. You want to add? Christine was going to add something.
I also want to shout out our bio team. I think that one of the common themes that we're seeing is a real intentionality with using the data. I know the team of teachers that is working currently in biology really spends a lot of time digesting the information that they're receiving. And it is very nice to see that their hard work is translated here.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You know, from our whole presentation this evening, I hope that you're picking up on some of these trends, right? These key ideas that we're looking at. We're doing some of the things that we told you back in the beginning of the year that we wanted to do. We have short-term goals for our district, priority standards, consistent academic language, instructional routines to have mastery of eligible content. Each of the department heads and Carly and Stacy spoke to that this evening. We can point to what we're doing in mathematics, in RELA, in science to move the needle forward. You can see that the scores are moving up because our teachers are now data focused. They're in it. They can see what we're doing and how it's impacting our scores as we move forward. Today was the first time we had the chance to talk with Linkit again about the amount of common assessments that we now have within the platform. I literally emailed the supervisors before I left because they were sharing all of the common assessments that are now in there. And whether they are for a grade or they are for mastery of eligible content, the number has doubled, tripled since, we've started. And that's what we've been looking for, so we can look at consistent, rigorous data to move forward so that we're making sure our students have the opportunity to interact with that type of rigor before they sit for a state assessment. And again, I'll just reiterate, that's not about prepping for a test. It's about making sure our students get the chance to perform at the level that they should in a measure that we're held accountable for. So we're very proud of this data. We're excited to see where we go from here, and we're happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
You're very welcome.
So I was just going to say, whatever our fourth grade teachers are doing,
Yeah,
when you
it's-
look at 3, 4, and 5, that fourth grade mid-year is outpacing the third and fifth graders.
And you know what's amazing?
Kudos to those fourth grade teachers.
Absolutely. And what's amazing with what you said, we can actually now specifically tell you what they're doing, right? We can tell you that they're using the same mean matter strategy in RELA. We can tell you that they're working with Dana Piv and Mr. Gurish in looking at eligible content and where our gaps are to make sure that we're prepared for state assessments. it's so empowering to be able to look back at the data where we were and to see what we've put in place intentionally. And then when we go back to see where our scores are, to see what improved or what didn't, we can go back and say, okay, that worked. Okay, that didn't go as far as we wanted. What are we missing? Where are we going? It's nice to be able to have a roadmap. And that's what this team behind me has been able to build. And you know, that makes me very excited.
I would really commend you all for this, just really thinking back to last year and these presentations and kind of what your goals were and what you wanted to do. I really see the effort that's been put in, specifically with RELA really jumped out to me when you were all talking about it last year, and even just down to the kindergarten. My daughter's in kindergarten, and I can see how intentional it is, the materials she's given. She's reading chapter books at this point, and I think a lot of that is because of you all, so thank you.
I really appreciate that, and I'll call out Ms. Burke for that. I think she's been on the hot seat every month since she's been here. We're like, welcome to Penn Ridge. How do you feel about presenting? So, but honestly, she jumped right in, and she's never shied away from that challenge. She's looked at the work, and she's just said, you know, I can work with this. I know how to move this forward. I know how to be intentional, and it's my privilege to be able to, you know, lead her forward with that. And a lot of times in doing that, it's my just stepping back and saying, go for it, girl. You know, I trust and believe in what you're about to do. And the reading specialists who came here this evening, they trust and believe in what they're doing. So I appreciate that. And you can see that from this full team behind me. They're really putting into place what we want, which is we want it to be intentional, looking at our long and short-term goals, and then what actionable items can we point to say that's what we're doing to accomplish it. So thanks for sharing.
If I may add, first I'd like to thank the team. I promise I won't use the word intentional.
I'm going to get myself a shirt.
But one of the early observations I made at, you know, my travels into schools, and, you know, we try to set the vision and goals for the district, is the word alignment. And I'm starting to see it all come together, and I think the board is as well, as far as having aligned systems, common assessments. So we use diagnostics, fully leveraging Linkit and these other tools. It's one thing to have them, but to fully leverage them. I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing tonight, that they're being implemented, and the data tells the story. And it's, we could sit and back and admire the problem and say, you know, the state, you know, the high stakes assessments and their standardized tests, but I love the team approach here, and we're trying to individually help our kids and make it, you know, when I hear about the packets that Ms. Sharino referenced earlier, and I know it's a pilot program, but I think through MTSS next year and a proper implementation, we will continue to yield results here from our kids, these various metrics. And as you can see, there's a ton of information here. It's very dense, it's hard to follow, but to have parents on board to work with their children and to really prepare them for these high-stakes assessments is just fantastic, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
I think the implementation of full-day kindergarten, very excited to see what that will bring.
Any other questions or comments? Well, we thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much. That's important stuff. All right, well, is there any public comment? I don't think anyone went out and signed their name on the sheet. Nope. So in that case, our next curriculum committee meeting is scheduled for April 8th, and I thank you all for coming, and have